So thank you very much for coming out here tonight. I'd like to welcome you all. It's always a brave crowd that was willing to go out in minus 41 weather. Our presenter tonight, Kirby, actually had an interview on CBC Radio this evening, and just before he was getting up, the local weather got on and said it's minus 41 tonight, so it's a good night to bundle in, stay inside, don't go out. And then he got up and had to take a sales pitch to get everyone out here tonight. So thank you for being brave. So without further ado, Kirby Hammond.
Thank you so much for coming. This issue of refugees coming to Canada has been such an exciting and fluid thing. It's been so hard to keep track of. During the election, we heard numbers being thrown out: 10,000 refugees, 25,000 refugees, 10 by now, 25 by then. And it was a confusing thing, and very exciting to listen to. So I started stepping back and reaching out to some of the agencies that work here with refugees, and went in and sat in at Welcome Place at one of their staff meetings. And it was a fascinating chat. I just opened the conversation and said, how do you feel? What's going on? Are we ready? One of the things that Welcome Place was saying at that point was, we've got all these people coming and we don't have anybody on staff that's knowledgeable of Syrian culture. And then we started talking about PTSD and how many people are trained to work with these sort of issues in the province. And the amount of baggage that these refugees are coming with. And where Winnipeg usually welcomes 1,000 new refugees every year, which is beautiful, we're taking in 2,000 in these couple of months, plus the 1,000 that we usually take in the best of times. But it's also a snapshot of time, where we are at as a community, January 15, 2016. So anyway, without further ado, let's get on with Arrival. For me, when I look at this film, I think about how astonishing it is that these two families that you saw spent 20 years in refugee camps. All the children that you saw in these films were all born in the refugee camps. And the first time they knew a real society and working towards becoming citizens is when they came here to Canada, when they got to Winnipeg. And that is just phenomenal, and it's a crazy thing to think about, and as big a deal as everything else that we're living through right now with the current crisis. So I think it's great that Canada's stepping up, and I think it's great that we're getting people excited to talk about these issues and think about these issues, and so many people are getting involved. And I think more and more Canadians are seeing what a wonderful thing it is for our communities to step up like this. And so I wouldn't mind playing the first video right away.
Tamam. Abi orada da var insanlar dolu Cenab abi. Tamam bekle. Abi orada da insan. Tamam geliyoruz. Tamam. Dur yapma bir şey. Böyle kenara. Orada da çantasını falan alıver abi, ağırlıkları. Oğlum canlı. Canlı abi. Abi ya. Abi canlı. Allah'ım canlı. Canlı, çabuk suyu çıkar ağzından abi. Kaldır yukarı, bacaklarından havaya kaldır. Çabuk Allah'ım ya Rabbim, nerede bu sahil güvenlik ya? Kıyamam ya. Şşt. Sar abi. Sar. Evet, Allah'ım. Erkek. Hadi üşüyor. Yan yatın. Yan yakıyor, kıyamam ona ben. Çabuk ört, çabuk.
So the little boy you saw in that video was all right. He survived. I thought of this video when I thought of what I wanted to put together, and it was an interesting process. My wife and I just spent a week at her parents' place in the States over the holidays, and they had the television up and the news channels going on, and there's just so many images. So much of the debate down there is about Trump, and very much different than what we're seeing here in Canada. We can think of the images. I'm sure many of you have seen the images of Prime Minister Trudeau at the Toronto airport welcoming the first refugees. The morning after Trudeau did that, and the day that was put up on television, I had a call from my father-in-law from the States who was saying it was jarring for Americans to see this positive image coming onto their television. And in the context of everything else and whatever else the debate is that's going on there. Now, my thinking is, I'm very proud of the Canadian message. I'm very proud that we are welcoming so many people, and I hope we can do more. But I don't feel smug about it, because when I look at these videos coming out of Europe and all the challenges that all these countries are up against.
Syria's war is a mess. After 4 years, the conflict is divided between 4 different sides on the ground. Each side has different foreign backers, and those foreign backers don't even agree with one another about who they're fighting for or who they're fighting against. To understand all this, the crisscrossing interventions, the moving battle lines, it helps to go back to the beginning of the war and watch how it unfolded. The first shots in Syria's war are fired in March of 2011 by Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad against peaceful Arab Spring demonstrators. In July, some of the protesters start shooting back, and some Syrian troops even defect from Assad's army to join them. They call themselves the Free Syrian Army, and the uprising becomes a civil war. Extremists from Syria and from around the region start traveling to join the rebels. Assad actually encourages this by releasing jihadist prisoners to tinge the rebellion with extremism, make it harder for foreigners to back them. In January of 2012, Al-Qaeda forms its new branch in Syria called Jabhat al-Nusra. Also around then, Syrian Kurdish groups, who've long sought autonomy, take up arms and de facto secede from Assad's rule in the north. That summer is when Syria becomes a proxy war. Iran, which is Assad's most important ally, intervenes on his behalf. By the end of 2012, Iran is sending daily cargo flights and has hundreds of officers on the ground. At the same time, the oil-rich Arab states on the Persian Gulf begin sending money and weapons to the rebels, mainly to counter Iran's influence and mainly through Turkey. Iran steps up its influence in turn in mid-2012 when Hezbollah, which is a Lebanese Shia group backed by Iran, invades to fight alongside Assad. The Gulf states respond by sending even more money and weapons to rebels, Saudi Arabia really leading the effort at this point, and this time going a lot through Jordan, who also opposes Assad. And by 2013, the Middle East is divided between generally Sunni powers on one side supporting the rebels and Shias on the other side supporting Assad. That April, the Obama administration, horrified by Assad's atrocities, signs a secret order authorizing the CIA to train and equip Syrian rebels. But the program stalls out at first. At the same time, the US quietly urges the Arab Gulf states to stop funding extremists, but their requests go ignored. In August, Assad uses chemical weapons against civilians in the town of Ghouta.
Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. It is in the national security interests of the United States to respond to the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons through a targeted military strike.
Russia proposed on Monday that Syria surrender control over its chemical weapons to the international community for its eventual dismantling to avoid a U.S. military strike.
The U.S. ends up backing down, but the whole thing establishes Syria as a great powers dispute, with America against Assad and Russia backing him. Just weeks later, the first American training in arms through that CIA program finally reached Syrian rebels. The US is now a participant in the Syrian war. In February of 2014, something happens that transforms the war. An Al-Qaeda affiliate, mostly based in Iraq, breaks away from the group over internal disagreements over Syria. The new group calls itself the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and it becomes Al-Qaeda's enemy. ISIS doesn't fight Assad. Instead, it fights the other rebels and it fights the Kurds, carving out a mini-state in Syria that it calls its caliphate. And that summer, it marches across Iraq, seizing territory and galvanizing the world against it. Then, in September, almost exactly 1 year after it almost bombed Assad in Syria,
We're moving ahead with our campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists, and we're prepared to take action against ISIL in Syria as well.
that summer, the Pentagon launches its own program to train Syrian rebels. But unlike the CIA program, this one will only train rebels who fight just ISIS, not Assad. And the program fizzles out, showing that America now opposes ISIS more than Assad, but also that there's really no like-minded force on the ground in Syria. In August, Turkey begins bombing Kurdish groups in Iraq and in Turkey, even as Kurds are fighting ISIS in Syria. Turkey also doesn't bomb ISIS in Syria. All of this deepens tension with the US over this question of whether they need to treat Assad or ISIS the primary enemy, and creates a lot of confusion among the Kurds about where the US stands. Now, Assad has been losing ground all this time, to ISIS, to the rebels, and in September of 2015, Russia intervenes in his behalf. Russia says it's there to bomb ISIS, but in fact it just bombs the anti-Assad rebels, including some rebels who are backed by the US. So as it stands now, there are lots of different groups and outside countries involved in Syria's war, and even among allies there are big disagreements about who their enemies are, who to support, and how to do it. And those contradictions are a big part of why, for this war, there is just no end in sight.
A Russian arsenal and mighty firepower have brought about the furious return of President Assad's forces in Syria. New fronts in the fighting bring fresh hell on the ground. An offensive in southern Aleppo, regime tanks taking half a dozen towns in the last 5 days. This was Mohammed Al-Mawas's house near Idlib. His father was pulled barely conscious from the rubble. Here, his mother. She died shortly afterwards. Russian jets were to blame, he says. It's hard to describe the feeling when you flee your country and you lose your home and your family and you watch your mother die right before you. It's indescribable, he told us. Meanwhile, Russia continues to deny causing civilian casualties. Russia's intervention in Syria is beginning to make a difference, firmly in President Assad's favour. In Aleppo, the regime is retaking places that it hasn't held in almost a year. This is the first wave of a combination of attacks between Russian, Iranian and Syrian forces. But if the rebels don't receive reinforcements soon, they could be at risk of losing significant amounts of territory. It's caused an exodus, with tens and today now hundreds heading to the Turkish border.
Europe. You know, that thing Belgium is in. If you've watched the news at all lately, you cannot have missed what has been happening there.
Europe's migrant crisis is getting worse by the day.
A migrant crisis spiraling out of control.
Hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers are risking everything.
A human wave washing over Europe's southern shores.
Hundreds of thousands of migrants have streamed into Europe, the largest influx there since the end of World War II.
Wow, the largest since the end of World War II. The video apparently produced by the mayor of Asatalem in Hungary, showing exactly how he and his police forces would prevent migrants from coming to his town.
Magyarország rossz választás. Asatalem pedig a legrosszabb.
Okay. A few things there. First, you can add as much scary music as you want. There is nothing imposing about one van driving alone on a country road.
La Hongrie fait partie de l'Europe. L'Europe, elle a des valeurs et on ne respecte pas ces valeurs en posant des grillages comme on ne ferait pas vis-à-vis d'Adieu.
If I find a smuggler, I will go with him. To the hell, no problem. It's better than to sitting here. It's a journey from death to death because we cross forests, seas, mafia, smugglers.
Politicians are winning votes off the backs of migrants. Well, if you, as they've just done in Hungary, if you deny them, although they have a paid ticket, and you don't let them get on board, you push them right into the hands of smugglers. So they get into trucks and vans and they die.
They've been through so much already, it will take more than Hungary's barbed wire fence or police reinforcements to keep migrants and refugees out of the European Union. Friday morning saw a relentless flow entering from Serbia, overcoming the latest obstacles on their marathon journey. Hungary's not their final destination, but it is hugely significant as the gateway to Europe's visa-free Schengen zone. A record number came through on Wednesday, more than 3,200. And as thousands more cross the sea from Turkey to Greece, then make their way across land northwards through the Balkans, Europe's worst refugee crisis since World War II looks set to continue. Syrians fleeing the civil war and Afghans escaping their own country's violence account for many of the refugees risking their lives for a brighter, safer future, almost all hoping to reach the more affluent countries of northern or western Europe. They hope this track will eventually lead to Sweden or Germany, which expects a record 800,000 asylum seekers and refugees to arrive by the end of the year. The EU still struggling to manage this crisis, given different attitudes to migration by member states. Whatever the arguments, these people who've left everything simply want somewhere to call home.
Disturbing cell phone video appears to show migrants at the main refugee camp here being fed like a herd of caged animals in a holding pen.
It's a shocking video that has garnered attention from around the world. As waves of desperate migrants sprint from a holding camp in Hungary, a camerawoman appears to trip a man running with his child in his arms. The woman also kicks other migrants as they run, including a young girl. Now the camerawoman is out of a job.
Oh, I'm sorry, she lost her job? That's absolutely terrible. But don't worry, I'm sure she can find a new one on actualmonster.com. It's no wonder refugees want to try to push deeper into Europe, and many of them are heading for one surprising country in particular that seems to actually want them.
They keep coming, thousands every day at the main train station in Munich, often greeted by applauding locals or welcoming volunteers. It's no wonder that Germany is the preferred destination for so many refugees.
There have been 5 years of war in Syria, and it is not only going nowhere, it seems to be going nowhere faster and faster and faster. It would be awesome if this absolutely riveting presidential contest we're having in the United States was producing constructive new ideas being well debated in our own country by our best and brightest in terms of what we ought to do about Syria, what to do about ISIS, what to do about Assad. Turns out that's not exactly the kind of campaign we're having this year.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
The politicians can pretend it's something else, but Donald Trump calls it radical Islamic terrorism. That's why he's calling for a temporary shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until we can figure out what's going on. He'll quickly cut the head off ISIS and take their oil. And he'll stop illegal immigration by building a wall on our southern border that Mexico will pay for.
We will make America great again.
We have spent more than $6 billion US dollars for Syrians in Turkey until now. $6 billion. However, the contribution we received from the international community is only $393 million US dollars, which is around only 6% and below all the expectations. This is not sustainable. The financial burden on Turkey due to this humanitarian crisis is increasing every day.
300 million people migrating, looking somewhere for a better...
So we have to enforce traditional maritime practice. We have to return them from where they... It is simply ludicrous that we have a situation where people at great risk of their lives are crossing the Mediterranean, they're picked up by our navies, and they know that they will be taken to Italy. So we have to return to traditional humanitarian maritime practice of picking people up and returning them to where they come from. Otherwise, more and more will keep coming.
Many politicians in other countries than Germany have been actively hostile to anyone even considering settling within their borders.
No way. You will not make the Netherlands home.
Please don't come. It's risky to come. We can't guarantee that you will be accepted here.
The Danish government has published these ads in a number of Lebanese newspapers. The text is obviously written in Arabic, and it's telling migrants, don't come to Denmark.
Let us go this way then, and that's it. Hopes or dreams collapsed because it's difficult to be a refugee in this country, and you have no relatives, and you have no friends, and you have nobody. Thankful for them and all the Swedish people, the Swedish government, because they let us get to their lands, and I am thankful so much.
What is the mood of the French people, as far as you can tell from your students at the University of Versailles and Paris? Are people afraid? Are they defiant? What are they feeling?
I could even say more than just the students. Generally speaking, people are still kind of in shock. It didn't go down. I was speaking with a lawyer who works with refugees, and he told me that it's actually like the refugees, it's post-trauma stress actually. So a lot of people are like that, and the younger are a bit lost. They don't know if they have to be afraid, if they have to take care. One of them asked me like, may I go to have a drink with my friends during the weekend and so on? Really? I said like, yeah, of course you can. I mean, you pay attention like normal attention, but of course you can. You're protected. I mean, we have 115,000 security officers around to protect us, and we are working every night and every day to protect the population. So of course they can. What I think will be very important is that when we'll have arrested the brain of the operation, and we will, at this moment, people might have some kind of rest. But of course, we need some resilience, because it's a permanent risk, and we have to accept that.
Professor Tarrant, merci beaucoup.
More than 3,000 refugees arrive each day in Germany.
They are fleeing war, poverty, seeking opportunity and hope. The EU has struggled to cope. Most land in Greece or Italy before heading for wealthier northern EU states. Germany has taken in the bulk of them, more than 1 million last year alone. But New Year's Eve attacks on women in Cologne and other German cities have prompted more than 600 criminal complaints, with suspicion resting on asylum seekers. It's putting pressure on German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her open-door migrant policy.
Now, all of a sudden, we're facing the challenge that refugees are coming to Europe, and we're vulnerable, as we see, because we do not yet have the order, the control that we would like to have.
And she has a message for refugees.
And we know, since the terrible events that night in Cologne, that for integration, we need the openness of the society. But the refugees also need to be willing to follow our rules and values as well.
A recent poll showed Merkel's popularity falling from 75% last April to around 58% now.
Hello. Welcome to Canada. Thank you. Pleasure to see you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, listen, it's our pleasure.
This is a wonderful night where we get to show not just a plane load of new Canadians what Canada's all about, but we get to show the world how to open our hearts and welcome in people who are fleeing extraordinarily difficult situations.
We got some stuff for you.
Tonight they step off the plane as refugees, but they walk out of this terminal as permanent residents of Canada with social insurance numbers, with health cards, and with an opportunity to become full Canadians.
Welcome to Canada. How to thank you. You are home. Thank you. Welcome home. Thank you. Thank you. So sorry.
I guess where do we begin? You know, we're in it now. The first refugees have been arriving. When did they first start coming to Winnipeg?
I would say that the whole mass movement of refugees into Winnipeg started for us, as of December 19. It was the interesting time because a lot of families actually arrived between Christmas and the New Year, a lot of them in a Christmas Day, New Year's Day. At this point, we have refugees arriving pretty much every day. We reached, and it's not only Manitoba Interfaith Immigration Council Welcome Place that receives government-assisted refugees. There is also Accueil Francophone, that is another organization, much smaller in number, but still receiving government-assisted refugees. And we know, but we don't know the numbers, that there is a lot of privately sponsored refugees who are arriving into Winnipeg, but also to the communities around the city, Altona, Winkler, Steinbach, Beausejour. This is the few that I personally know of. Only for Manitoba Interfaith Immigration Council, since December 19, we received over 200 individuals. For the organization that has a mandate of receiving 500 refugees a year, receiving 200 within 2 weeks, it was a challenge. So here we are right now.
Noelle, what are some of the bigger challenges that you're seeing out there?
I think a few kind of unique features that I've seen. One, obviously, is the sheer volume of public support that's come. And I know there's a few folks in the summer that we spent this summer protesting against the federal government, against the politics of fear and hatred, and all of the draconian policies that were in fact closing Canada's doors to refugees. And then moments later, after the election, all of a sudden we were celebrating, this going back to Canadian values and actually opening the doors to refugees, and seeing that we as a society and we as community members can change the public discourse and move away from a politics of fear and divisiveness towards one of inclusion and compassion. Housing is going to be a major challenge for private-sponsored refugees, for government-assisted refugees. For years, we've been talking about the lack of affordable housing in Winnipeg for low-income people in general, newcomers, Indigenous populations, low-income folks, and now with this influx, that's going to be a real bottleneck. And then the final one is something that's really unique is the role of the Indigenous community. It was really cool in Winnipeg when the first Syrians, kind of like public Syrian government-assisted refugees came, that there were Indigenous women drumming at the airport to welcome the Syrians to Treaty 1 land. And I think that relationship between the Indigenous and newcomer community, a number of us have been working on it for years to try to build bridges through the Youth Peace Building Project. We just did Meet Me at the Bell Tower, welcomes the newcomer community. And now there's a Friendship Center who's going to be hosting a powwow to welcome our newest arrivals. So that relationship is so key. I think, and is quite a unique feature to this particular influx of refugees.
When I went to Welcome Place in November and I sat at that meeting, and there was a lot of frustration, a lot of curiosity, a lot of wondering where things were going to go. How are you feeling about it now?
From the organization that has 120, that can host 120 people at once, like I said, we're right now hosting almost 230. So finding the temporary accommodation, it was challenging. We overcome it, and like Noel said, that due to the fact that different level of government offered a lot of support in putting this all together. The follow-up with the move to permanent accommodation, it will be challenging very soon, due to the fact that Winnipeg rate of affordable housing is very, very low. And it's not only for the refugees who are the low income, because their support from the government is on the level of social assistance, but also for people who are on social assistance, for people who are working poor. So there is a competition, do we like it or not, there is a competition on the market for affordable housing. So another plea for the affordable housing probably will be helpful from all level of politics. We also have to realize that the Syrian community in Winnipeg is relatively small. So for the big number of arrivals, and also you've seen on a video how diverse the people are even in Syria. So the community, of course, is also diverse. At this point, everybody's working together. Everybody, it's, you know, that all religion and tribal issues are put aside, and everybody is equally excited about, you know, our countrymen, pretty much, to the level. But the support that is needed for the Syrian refugees, especially in connection to the society, it's huge. It's huge, and this is something that will not be tackled within the first month. It is something that will need to continue for the next month and years to go on. Teaching basic skills is another thing that we're looking for, not babysitting. Those are adults. Those are people who can count the money, who can take a bus, who are capable, and this is what we are doing right now.
Just out of curiosity, how many Arabic-speaking interpreters do you actually have at Welcome Place?
As of this afternoon, or as of Monday? We've been, you know, the volume also affected us, you know, it affected our staffing. We used to have 2 Arabic-speaking full-time counselors and 1 Arabic-speaking assistant. And I think 2 life skill trainers who are working with people, teaching them life skills. At this point, I think that we're already at the level of 2 additional counselors, 3 additional assistants, and we are hiring people as of next week. We are unionized, so we have to go through the whole process of, applications and first advertising, then application. But I think that at this point, our staff, especially Arabic-speaking staff, tripled, and we know that this is still not enough.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts, for anybody up here, or just to share some ideas?
This is just am I on? This is just a very general comment, but I was reflecting on involvement of members of this church and of course many other Manitobans. And it comes back to my mind, we probably 30 years since we became involved. I think about Chile, I think about Nicaragua, I think about Vietnam people, Kosovo, and now Syria. And I was just reflecting on what I see as a difference that is taking place over that period of time. And it's encouraging to hear from you folks the degree of cooperation and coordination that is taking place. Now, there was always a certain amount of that, but it seems to me it's enhanced, and I think that really augurs very well for the future. And the other thing is, in terms of the point that was being made about the level of concern and compassion that we see now. Now, I don't think people are more compassionate now than they were 30 years ago, but it all has to do with publicity and awareness. And as you mentioned, Kirby, with the boy on the beach, I mean, it's interesting how one incident can sort of trigger enormous compassion. And I sense that that is very real and will really move people. So I think that there will be a lot of support for the work that you folks are doing. And I happen to be, my wife and I happen to be part of the group with Anne and Larry, and I know we'll be eager to pick your brains and get whatever help we can. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
I work with immigrants on a daily basis, and something that's become very apparent to me in the last few months is the ignorance of the general population towards what people are going through despite the media. The amount of racism I see now on a daily basis it's horrifying and it's shocking, and it's coming from people that I would consider intelligent on many levels. I know you have your hands full right now with everything that's going on, but do you foresee any kind of resources coming down the drain pipe, so to speak, to educate these people who are really good people at heart, but are misdirected in terms of how they're interpreting the entire situation, largely based on the fear-mongering that's playing out in society right now?
Relationships are so key to debunking myths and stereotypes. And we haven't talked about volunteerism. It sounds like in your church already you guys are doing a lot to build connections. But I think having relationships with the newcomer community and volunteering at places like IRCOM, where we run after-school programs, the Needs Center that runs after-school programs, or Mosaic volunteering with the women in English classes. Obviously, folks who have xenophobia aren't necessarily going to take that step, but you might take that step and bring them with you to community celebrations. I honestly think those one-on-one connections are the most effective way to break down walls. So.
Also, at the same time, I will go back to the media role, and you've been giving an example of this little boy whose body was washed out to shore to start the whole support for the Syrian refugees. I think that unfortunately recently there is a lot of very negative images. We've seen it that pretty much what is going on in Europe right now probably changed a mood of a lot of people. I think that we are on our end of the front line still fortunate enough that we are dealing with people who are passionate, who are compassionate, and who are willing to give and who are willing to support the cause. And the more of these positive images we will start to show in our media, it should change the general public. I don't even say that it's the xenophobia. I think that this is pretty much the following the crowd thing, like Europeans are scared, so we should be too. And then it goes on, they are taking our jobs, they are doing this, and then it becomes they and us. And the deeper and the longer those they and us will go, then it will be more difficult to bring everything to we.
Thank you so much.
I have been in Canada more than 25 years. I've been in Winnipeg about 13 years. 3 of my children graduated from Calvin High School. My daughter, she's a nurse at Health Center. My other son, he's working in Alberta. And I have 2 more in universities and 3 more still high school and middle school and 1 at home. I'm father of 7 children. Thanks for that. So I'm saying thank you, Canadian government, thank Canadian people. Thanks very much.
We're just going to take one more question. There's a gentleman at the back, and then I think we'll wrap it up there, and maybe we can all just meander if you have any more questions in the hallway or whatnot. But please go ahead.
My name is Abdi Yusuf Jama. I came here 2003. So the government sponsored me, and I'm one of the people that stayed at the welcome place.
And welcome place waa soo dhaweeyeen aad bay u mahadsanayeen waxa weeyaan waana u mahadcelinayaa dawladda Canada iyo intii ka qayb qaadatay soo qaadista familkayga.
I'm really grateful for the government of Canada and the people that helped me and my family to come to Canada.
waxaas dhib kala jirtay waxaan soo galay aniga 1991kii waxaan Soomaaliya dagaalku ka bilowday waxaan soo galay Kenya 22 sano ayaan ku noolaa dalka Canada dalka Kenya.
So I was refugee since 1991. For 22 years I stayed in camps of Kenya. Refugee camps in Kenya, specifically Kakuma.
dhibaatada qaxootiga adduunka meel kasta uu joogaba waxa same wax uu kala duwan yahay ma jiro.
And I want to point out that when people become refugees, no matter where they are, the pain is the same.
waxaanu codsanaynaa dawladana ugu mahadcelinaynaa sida hore noo soo qaatay in kuwa naga maqan noogu keeno.
So the only thing I would like to say is that the government helps us if they're getting a family all together, not half of them or one of them. I want to thank the welcome place because of them making us settle better and giving us the help that we needed. Because of that, I am now able to function. Thank you guys, everyone that came, and I'm so sorry that I took long.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much.
He's saying in Italian, actually, Viva Canada.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone.
I just wanted to thank Kirby and Marta and Noel for presenting tonight and for all the wonderful questions and stories that you've shared. Thank you.